Most people assume that religion is just a bunch of rules. And to be fair, most religions do tend to degenerate into just a set of rules. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. But if you take that approach to the Sermon on the Mount, you get problems. At one point, Martin Luther's reaction was that all the little nitpicky rules in the Old Testament were bad enough. But then Jesus comes along in the gospel and makes it even worse. Jesus is like, new rule, you can't even think about it. Well, that's impossible. So if Jesus is just giving a new list of rules, then the point has to be that no one can measure up. But what if that's not the point he's making? What if the point Jesus is making is that it's not about rules at all? In Deuteronomy, the great statement of the Old Covenant, there are chapters and chapters of rules. Then, at the end, you get blessings and curses. Blessings if you keep the rules, and curses if you don't. The blessings come at the end because they're after all the rules, because that's how you get blessed. But the Sermon on the Mount is the exact opposite. The blessings are at the very beginning. They can't be based on following any Jesus rules because Jesus hasn't said anything yet. Blessed is literally the first word out of his mouth. And the first people blessed haven't done anything. The poor in spirit, those who mourn, something else has to be going on here. Now, at the end of all the introductory material to the Sermon on the Mount, right before Jesus gets into the meat of the sermon, he says, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. But no one can keep the rules better than those guys. They were professional rule keepers. The only way our righteousness can exceed that of the scribes and the Pharisees is if righteousness is about something deeper than keeping a bunch of rules. And the truth is, it always was. The laws in the Old Testament weren't arbitrary. It's not like God went, hey, Gabriel, you think we should make murder right or wrong? I'm going to go with wrong. No, every command in the Old Testament derives from a principle. And all of those principles derive from the very character of God. Murder is wrong because God is life. The purpose of the law was to reveal God's heart. More than that, what does Leviticus say over and over? Be holy as I am holy. God gave Israel the law because he wanted them to become like him. The problem Jesus had with the Pharisees was that they figured out all kinds of ways to keep the letter of the law while totally missing God's heart. The failure of the ultimate rule keepers to take on the heart of God shows the failure of focusing on rule keeping itself. That's what the last half of Matthew chapter 5 is all about. Proverbs that the ancients came up with that technically kept the law, but allowed the exact opposite of God's heart. There's a saying that's been popular for a while now. Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship. But how do we develop that relationship? How does it grow? How do we come to know God better on a personal level? by letting him transform our heart into his heart. That is what the Sermon on the Mount is about. Not a bunch of rules, but about sharing in and living out the heart of God.